Hello. I said a while ago a few videos ago, that I wanted to write a book, two books, one about how to how countries should be run now, maybe, and the other one was to start a religion. First, I was going to write the one about how countries should be run now because thanks to COVID-19, we now know that governments will just trample on our personal rights and freedoms whenever they feel like it, and use use the fact that the masses are weak and that the vast majority of them will just as soon as they have a little fear, they'll do whatever they're told. They'll just blindly do whatever they're told. So there needs to be laws, rules, different way of running countries, democratic countries, to to stop this from happening again. By the way COVID-19 should have been handled was, we know that for a fact that it affects almost exclusively people that have serious health issues and or weakened immune systems, and generally that means very old people. What should have happened is the government should have warned those people who are vulnerable and told them they should probably self-quarantine, and that the government would help them out and let everyone else run their normal lives. Because if you're under 60 and you're healthy otherwise, the chances of you dying of COVID-19 are less than the chances of you dying in a car crash, much less than you dying of a car crash in America. So it was just silly. So I wrote the book, finished it, and proofread it. And I think it's pretty much the way I want it to be. So now I will, over the next 4 or 5 videos, one per day, I will read the book. I was going to, publish it, put it on somewhere to be an e-reader, but I just thought, what's the point? I would have liked to make a little money out of it, but I didn't think, I wasn't going to make much anyway, and the point was just to get it out there, and I think this is the better way to get it out there. So I think there's a better chance people will see it here than they will the other way. I don't think this is going to change anybody's life. I hope it does to some extent, and if it gets people thinking and talking about some of these issues, well then, it was worth it, and it makes me feel better for trying. So this is the first book, and it's got a lousy title, but I couldn't really think of anything catchy, and I didn't really care that much, so the title is Women Should Run the Countries, Mostly Men Should Run the Economies, and 14 to 17-year-olds should have the right to vote. And I will now read the book. Like I said, I'll break it down to 4 or 5 different readings. So, and now the book, Women Should Run the Countries, Mostly Men Should Run the Economies, and 14 to 17-year-olds should have the right to vote. I was not certain before, but I am now, April 2020. All governments cannot be allowed to continue as they presently are. No, I am not talking about violent takeovers or anything of that nature. These changes must be done peacefully. But the system of government in most of the free world is fatally flawed and must be destroyed and a new one put in its place. Excuse me. A near complete state of martial law like lockdowns all around the world for a galactically blown out overreaction to the COVID-19 virus has proven this. Governments cannot be trusted with our lives any longer. They are not worthy of our support or our tax dollars. We must legally and peacefully sweep them away and put in their place governments with far less power and say over our lives. The statistics are already in. As of today, April 22nd, 2020. We already know for a fact, for those bothered enough to look at them with open minds, that COVID-19 is not remotely near as deadly as the mainstream media, MSM, and most governments, except Sweden's for one, are trying to make us believe. And yes, both are, in my opinion, deliberately trying to cause tremendous fear in the general population for different reasons. The MSM, mainstream media, has seen their ratings profits falter as the internet grows larger and larger along with other competition. Their views are getting older and will soon largely die out. They know this. So, in my opinion, whenever they can, they deliberately try and overhype stories. Why? Because less people watch the news when things are calm, but far more watch it when things are going badly. And people tend to flock to the big mainstream media sites when things go especially wrong. So COVID-19 has given the MSM a golden opportunity for fantastic ratings and greater profits to go along with it. So the MSM is making the COVID-19 virus out to be as terrible as they can. And they seem to only interview people who will go along with this for their own selfish, and these people for their own selfish, irresponsible reasons. To feed as much bad news and cause as much fear as they can to the masses. So these small masses will watch the news more. So these same masses will watch the news more. The MSM many decades ago could be moderately trusted. Now, they have hit a new low and have now proven once and for all that they cannot be trusted in the slightest. They have become not only useless, but harmful to humanity. They are now part of the problem. Fortunately, the internet will eventually kill them off almost entirely. But for the time being, they should be ignored and treated for what they are. Hideous institutions designed for profit above all else. And government? Well, the male-dominated governments of the world are already well known for corruption, selfishness, and general uselessness. We already know they will do whatever they can to gain power, stay in power, and grow their power. Politicians, especially male ones, are power addicts. They are addicted to power, and they just want more of it. Why do you see so many wealthy people get into politics? To help the masses that they care nothing about. Oh, sorry, I'm going to read that again. I wrote it and I still didn't say it right. They are addicted to power and they just want more of it. Why do you see so many wealthy people get into politics? To help the masses that they care nothing about? Sure. No, it's to get a taste of the ultimate power that they crave. And the same goes for most male, though a few female, bureaucrats, especially the more powerful ones. And COVID-19 has given them the perfect opportunity to stuff themselves with the greatest power fest in recent, possibly modern history. These politicians and top bureaucrats have complete and total control over everything. They can tell people where to go and what to do. They can even force them not to shake hands, to close their businesses, to stay under virtual house arrest. And not only that, they and the mainstream media have completely conned the masses into loving them for doing all these terrible things. I cannot say they have hit a new low because there are always semi-human scum, but at least the MSM used to keep them in line to some extent. But now that the MSM is as corrupt as they are free to attack our rights at will. They will, in my opinion, create, fabricate, overemphasize, overblow, and flat out lie to get the masses to allow them to do what they wish. And the central banks are in lockstep with them. Hideous institutions, central banks, set up for one purpose, to make sure the major banks, corporations, and their wealthy shareholders make as much money as the central banks can get away with. There may be a few decent, but staggeringly ignorant and or arrogant people in some central banks. But most of them overall are, in my opinion, detestable people who are devastating the future of our economies for their short-term selfish desires. They are even more despicable than the MSM and politicians' powerful bureaucrats. They must be legally eradicated and wiped clean from the earth. And what about those COVID-19 facts I mentioned? They are all over the web. Just look for them. I will give you a head start. First, look at Sweden. They are doing far less lockdowns than most of the rest of Europe and North America. And what is the result? As of today, according to the website worldometers.info/coronavirus, they have a lower COVID-19 death rate than either the UK or France. And their total daily cases have flattened out, just like most of Europe's. But, according to the experts who work for the corrupt governments, they did a terrible thing and should be awash in COVID-19 deaths. Nope, they are not. However, it is hard to know for certain about death rates as many countries judge a COVID-19 death differently than others. Some say that if you died of a heart attack but happened to test positive for COVID-19, that you died of COVID-19. Others that are more sensible, like Germany seems to be on this count, would call that death one caused by a heart attack. So it will take time to wash out all the statistics. Want another site? Try covid19tracker.health. Oh my gosh. It's a long one. Basically, the New York, I'll put in the link. I'll put a link in the description for that and the other one. It's basically the New York State. I'm not reading this now, I'm just saying this. It's the New York State COVID-19 fatalities tracker. Anyway, now I'm reading again. Starting now. this is the link. This is a link to the New York. I'm explaining it. This is a link to the New York State Department of Health. It monitors statistics of fatalities from COVID-19 in New York State. Go to the bottom of the page and you will see that almost 90%, and it is growing almost every day, of all fatalities attributed to COVID-19 all had at least one serious health issue. Plus, it also shows in another list, just above that one, the ages of those whom have died of COVID-19. Today, April 22nd, 2020, it shows there are 15,302 fatalities. And of those, a whopping 84.2% were over 60 when they died. 64.2 of them over 70, and only 5.7 of them are under 50. Include all those under 60, and it is still only 15.6%, and a lot of those obviously had at least one serious health issue already. And what about closing the elementary schools to protect the children? Well, out of 15,302 fatalities so far, only 2 are under 9, and only 8 are under 19. Another source? There was a report from Bloomberg on March 18th, 2020 by blah, blah, blah. Put a link in the description, that read more than 99% of Italy's coronavirus fatalities were people, quote, more than 99% of Italy's coronavirus fatalities were people who suffered from previous medical conditions, according to a study by the country's National Health Authority, unquote. And the data goes on and is clearly showing that 90+% of those who die of COVID-19 were already seriously ill. It also shows that those under 50 and even largely under 60 whom are reasonably healthy have little to fear from COVID-19 as far as dying is concerned. In fact, if you're under 50, no matter what state of health you're in, on average you have a far, far greater chance of dying in a car accident in America than of COVID-19. And these are proven facts from reliable sources, many of them government sources. By the way, we also know that about 1/2 of those who get COVID-19 are asymptomatic, i.e. show no symptoms at all. So they are obviously not being tested. So that means a lot more people have the virus than is presently believed, which makes the present death rate even more out of whack, i.e. too high. What the government should have done is obvious. Tell those with serious health issues, weakened immune systems, that they could be in danger and that they should self-quarantine themselves. Plus, the government should offer assistance for those people. And the rest of the population should have been allowed to go on as per normally. Yes, a few otherwise healthy people would die of COVID-19, but only a tiny fraction of those that die of it have no serious health issues. And according to the WHO, the World Health Organization, about 650,000 people die of the seasonal flu every single year, despite flu shots being available, though apparently they are at best only about 65% effective. And I don't see the world shutting down to save 2/3 people for who have the flu, or who might die of the flu. COVID-19 is being used by the MSM to make money, and the corrupt, mostly male politicians and many female politicians whom are overreacting out of both corruption and or overprotection, and the central bank's carte blanche to literally shut down the plan and give trillions of dollars to their wealthy buddies while the public have barely a clue what is going on. All this is disgusting, staggeringly immoral, and unforgivable. All of these institutions are beyond saving and must be eradicated legally. As I said, the mainstream media, the MSMs will die on their own, thank goodness. And the central banks must be eradicated and are totally unnecessary. They will not be missed except by the wealthy. But unfortunately, for the time being at least, we need governments. By the way, I'm not calling for anarchy in any way, shape, or form. So they must be hollowed out and forced to become as powerless and uncorrupted as is realistically possible. How? Constitutions must change radically. Laws must be eliminated. There are far too many of them. Individual rights must be strengthened so no government may ever take them away again. Free enterprise must reign. Central banks must be destroyed for good. Governments must never post unbalanced budgets, thus taking away much of their power. Every human being must be guaranteed the basics of life: shelter, food, water, clothing, full medical care, free local transit, and the internet. Yes, I consider access to the internet to be a human right. They may, if able, have to work a maximum of 20 to 24 hours per week for the government in return for this, but it must be available to every human being. What I'm saying there is basically if you need welfare and the government will give you shelter, food and water, clothing, full medical care, free local transit, and the internet if you work 20 to 24 hours at most for them in return. Instead of just handing people cash for welfare. What else? Wars must stop and the strong must protect the weak. Military budgets must average a maximum of 1% of GDP on average. Right now it is 2.141%. Sexual assaults must be drastically curtailed. Women or some men must raise their children and not irresponsibly, selfishly throw them in daycare. That should be throw them into daycare. Who wrote this crap? No, I'm just kidding. I wrote it. Government power must be drastically limited and focused. The environment must be protected, but only as far as the majority of the people want to protect it. Minimum prison sentences for violent criminals must be massively increased. Nonviolent crimes must be punished far less so. The death penalty must end. The UN Security Council veto that China, France, Russia, the UK, and the USA now have must be eliminated. Or throw the UN on the scrap heap along with the League of Nations and start a new one. That makes no sense. Or throw the UN on the scrap heap and start a new one. 14 to 17-year-olds must have the vote and many other adult rights. Suicide must be legalized. Prison inmates must be separated from each other. Recreational drug use must be legalized. Sane adults must have complete legal control of their body. We do not have that now. Corruption in government must be reduced drastically and more. How? Specifically how? Many ways that I will discuss in this book. But the 6 main ways are, I called them the big 6. The big 6. 1, women must run all governments, both as politicians and bureaucrats. 2, free speech is an absolute right and cannot be stopped by the government in any way, unless the person in question is directly inciting illegal violence against another citizen of that country. This must be determined in open court before it can be acted against. 3, men and women that wish to must run the economy any way they see fit, outside of fraud, environmental, and possibly health and safety laws. No assistance, no limitations, no corrupt central banks. Hire, fire anyone they wish for any reason they wish. No government bailouts ever. Let the buyer beware should be the government motto. If you fuck up, tough. That's not part of the motto, that's just the end of that. 4, 14 to 17-year-olds must be allowed to vote, drive, live on their own, and work full-time jobs. 5, sane adults, 18 plus, must have complete control over their bodies. We must be able to consume anything we wish, drugs, alcohol, battery acid, anything. Kill ourselves whenever we wish, live our lives as recklessly as we want to, regardless of the danger, so long as these actions do not directly cause physical harm to others. And 6, every law-abiding citizen must give me at least $10,000. No, I'm just kidding. 6, every law-abiding human must have automatic access to clean, safe, shelter, food, water, clothing, internet, full health care, free local transit. There must also be penalties to politicians who try and break those laws. Right now, laws exist in many countries that are supposed to protect the freedoms of the masses, but they're clearly not working. Just look at America. Their Bill of Rights is being violated every day by most of the country throughout this COVID-19 paranoia. The politicians are breaking the laws, yet the public is letting them, and the mainstream media are doing little, nothing either. How can they do this when these rights are in place? Because there are no laid out penalties for those who break them. It says, in essence, do not break this law, but it says nothing about the punishment for breaking that law, taking away that right. It's like having a murder law with no penalty for the crime, so that gives murderers little legal incentive not to murder. Sure, they go before a judge and admit they did it, but since the judge has no sentences available to him or her to punish them, the guilty murderer goes scot-free. Thus we have penalties for murderers. We must also have them for politicians who violate people's rights. I propose that any politician who votes for a bill law that takes away, in any way whatsoever, a right in that country's constitution, charter, whatever, then that politician is automatically banned from ever running, holding political office again in that country. on any level, federal, state, provincial, municipal, anything. In addition, they must receive an automatic jail sentence of at least 5 years in prison. And this must be served in prison, not under house arrest. As well, the sentence must be served in full. No out early with good behavior nonsense. And if that does not stop politicians from breaking the law, from taking our rights away from us, then make the penalties harsher until it does not stop them. Until it does stop them. Most rights that people enjoy in their countries can be taken away from them far too easily. All the politicians have to do is con the masses into thinking that they must have their rights removed for their own safety, and the masses will often go along with it, being as most of the masses seem to have wet spaghetti for spines. Penalties must be put in place that override conning the masses. The new laws must have the teeth to make sure that they stay in force no matter what. The big six. 1. Women must run governments, both as politicians and bureaucrats. Boy, this is going to take a while. I'm only 5 pages into this 25-page first section. It's only 21 minutes already. Oh, well. 1. Women must run all governments, both as politicians and bureaucrats. First off, I'm a man. I'm a middle-aged, 40 to 59, heterosexual, WASP male. Not that I give a shit about sexual preference or race or religion, but a heck of a lot of people do, so I'm getting it out of the way now. Actually, speaking of those 3 things, I think someone's sexual preference is no one else's business. It's like being right or left-handed. Who gives a whatever? It's totally irrelevant. And race, as far as I'm concerned, there is only one race, the human race. Calling someone an entirely different race just because they have more or less melanin in their skin is beyond stupid. Undoubtedly, some guy, probably white, a long time ago, wanted to think up a way to make himself feel superior to other people. So he came up with the monumentally stupid idea of different races. And the ignorant masses, being ignorant, went along with it. Bullshit. There is one race of humans, the human race, and we are all equal in it. Unless you're left-handed. No, I'm just kidding. It doesn't matter. And finally, religion. Religion to me is humanity's dumbest mass-used invention. To believe in non-existent beings that no one has any scientific, factual proof that they ever existed, and to take words written in books thousands of years ago by people who probably just wanted money or fame or to be able to bed the best-looking gal in their village, and to take it all as verbatim and to run your entire life by it and run around forcing other people to live their lives by it is complete nonsense. I guarantee you millions more people have been killed due to religion than have ever been saved by them. I think all major religions are for the weak and or the ignorant and or the desperate. If you are religious, you are at least one of those 3. However, if you want to believe in something that there is no scientific proof whatsoever of, go ahead, knock yourself out. But stop ramming it down everyone else's throats. It is beyond arrogance to assume that your God Club manual must be followed by everyone else. Keep your fucking religious views to yourself. If someone asks you about them, fine, explain away. But stop telling them that they must do this or that when you have not a shred of scientific proof that almost anything you are spouting ever actually happened. And you sure as shoot cannot prove that your God Club is the best one. Anyway, I'm a heterosexual WASP male, and I like being a guy. Actually, I like it very much. I have no desire to stop being a male and start being a female. That idea holds zero interest for me. Even with all my normal male instincts that seem to do me no good whatsoever, normal negative male instincts, I should say, that seem to do me no good whatsoever, I still like being a dude, and I have no interest in being a dudess. Having typed that, though, it has been painfully obvious to me for decades that women clearly are the more evolved of the 2 sexes. They are miles from perfect, but they clearly seem to have less negative urges than males do, with exceptions. Just look at U.S. prisons. Roughly 90% of all inmates in U.S. prisons are men. Now, 60 plus years ago or so, you could claim that that was due to the fact that women stayed home and had little power, while men had all the power and got out and ran the economies and fought the wars and ran the countries. So naturally, they got into more trouble, though I don't really buy that anyway. But that is no longer the case, with apparently more women in North American universities than men, plus women are fully involved in the economies of most of the world. No, men have a ton of bad instincts. instincts that are obviously left over from caveman days. What are these instincts? Well, men, with exceptions, have far higher desires for sex, violence, competition, conquest, greed, control, power than most women do. If I have to prove this to you, congratulations, you are clueless on this matter. It should be obvious. If you are a sane adult with an IQ over 60 and you honestly are not aware of these things, get out more because this should be staggeringly obvious. Again, just look around. The inmate statistics covers most of them. And sex drive, just go on an online sex chat forum and look at the ratio of men to women posting. That ratio will be at least 9-1. And several of the women will be adult entertainers trying to drum up business. Women can go on these websites just as easily as men do. So why don't they? Because the female sex drive is generally miles less than the male one. It's not that we men can help having these stronger desires that are almost exclusively negative in nature. Though they can help in some areas, like war and business, to a point. We were born with them. How we handle them is our responsibility, but that we have them in the first place is not. And those men that can utilize them properly and not get carried away by them have a definite edge over men who cannot adequately control them. But how does all this affect men in politics? Simple. Men are far more easily corrupted than women. Plus, many men go into politics for more selfish reasons. Again, generally with exceptions, than women often do. Though there are plenty of corrupt female politicians. Though there are plenty of corrupt female politicians, they usually have more compassion for their constituents than their male counterparts do. And for certain, there is a far higher percentage of men who enter politics for no other reason than to satiate some of their desires, like for power. In fact, I cannot remember the last time I remember hearing a male politician on any federal level sound as if he is not either very corrupt and or very closed-minded. And having a closed mind in politics is terrible. How can politics change with the times if the people inside it refuse to change at all? Women are generally more compassionate and sensitive than men are. And what do you want from your politicians ideally? Someone greedy and selfish and in it for power only, or someone who may be less greedy but has a closed mind? Doesn't make any sense. I'm going to read that again. Someone greedy and selfish and in it for power only, or someone who may be less greedy but has a closed mind? Or do you want someone who may be corrupt or somewhat closed-minded but who has a greater compassion and thus this forces them to do the right thing from time to time? Okay, that makes some sense. And that is the point. What you want from politicians is people who put aside their own wants and desires for the greater good. Who will be forced to do what's right by their emotional makeup. And since men have a much stronger desire for lust, power, violence, competition, and greed, and are less sensitive, compassionate, they have to fight against far, far more of their instincts to be good politicians than women do. It simply is more instinctive for women to do the right thing than it is for men, which is why 90% of U.S. inmates are men. Women are no smarter than men by IQ that I have seen. So why are so many men in jail? Because we have so many base desires to fight off to do the right thing. And when things are going badly, we have so many other ways to satiate our base desires, and many more of them are far more morally wrong than women have. They certainly are more violent on average. So are men now far more incarcerated than women due to stupidity, or are women just better? Probably neither. It's just that men arrive out of the womb with an incredibly larger load of baggage to have to deal with. Maybe this baggage was essential to our survival when humans first evolved. But now, except for a few examples, they are mostly getting in the way. And until they have been evolved out of us, that leaves us at a distinct disadvantage to women, especially with the integrity and decency required to be good politicians, bureaucrats. So in my strong opinion, women must run the countries and the bureaucracies. At the very least, they deserve a chance to see how they do. Men have largely had the wheel for centuries. It's women's turn, and they can hardly do any worse. And I am not the only guy who thinks this way. In mid-December 2019 in Singapore, former United States President Barack Obama said the following. This is taken from an article released on December 16, 2019 on the BBC website, written by Sierra Asher. I'll put the link in the description. Quote, speaking in a private event on leadership, Mr. Obama said while in office he had mused what a world run by women would look like. Quote, he said, now women, I just want you to know you are not perfect, but what I can say pretty indisputably is that you're better than us men. I'm absolutely confident that for 2 years, if every nation on earth was run by women, you would see a significant improvement across the board on just about everything, living standards and outcomes, unquote. When asked if he would ever consider going back into political leadership, he said he believed in leaders stepping aside when the time came. Quote, if you look at the world and look at the problems, it's usually old people, usually old men, not getting out of the way, unquote, he said. Quote, it is important for political leaders to try and remind themselves that you are there to do a job, but you are not there for life. You are not there in order to prop up your own sense of self-importance or your own power, unquote. That's the end of the article, part that I quoted. And I agree with him 100%, except I want to give women at least 20 years to prove themselves. Enough is enough. Women need to run our